Dive watches are not only practical tools for divers, but also beloved accessories for watch enthusiasts and collectors worldwide. With their rotating timing bezels, bright glowing lume, high legibility, robust durability, and purposeful utility looks, the dive watch is iconic. Among the sea of dive watches, there are a handful that stand out, and many could be considered historically relevant or hold a special place in collectors' hearts. But how many of those have the cultural presence that we could truly call them iconic? It might depend on your definition or how deep you are into watches. These are 8 of the most iconic dive watches. Starting the list off, it makes sense to begin in the birth year of dive watches, 1953, where we saw 3 iconic timepieces get released. The very first being the Blancpain 50 Fathoms. Introduced in 1953, the name refers to a British unit of measurement just shy of 100 meters, which is roughly the water resistance of all dive watches released in 1953. Developed for the French Navy, there have been many versions of the 50 Fathoms over the years. The very first reference is perhaps the most representative. Next up is the Zodiac Sea-Wolf, which was also first released in 1953. The Sea-Wolf doesn't have the luxury clout some of the other watches have, but they were right there neck and neck for the first ever dive watch. It remains the most accessible and affordable link to that history today, and even has an ace up its sleeve in terms of innovative cred. You know how on the first 15 minutes of the dive watch bezel are highlighted by hash marks? Well, Zodiac was the first to design that feature, and soon after, many other watch brands did the same. The third iconic dive watch is the Doxa Sub 300. First introduced in 1967, Doxa is a brand beloved by divers, and its distinctively busy bezel, featuring 2 scales, makes it easily recognizable. It was developed with input from famed undersea explorer, but Doxa is also known for something else, the color orange. The brand created the first dive watch with the bright orange dial with the intention of improving legibility. Although this didn't quite work out, since red-orange is one of the first colors in the spectrum to disappear as one descends underwater, but it did result in a very eye-catching watch. Since that time, many watchmakers have followed suit with orange divers of their own. Moving on, we have none other than the Rolex Submariner, which was introduced in 1953. The Rolex Submariner as an icon kind of goes without saying. You might love it or roll your eyes toward it, but the impact and status of the sub isn't debatable. Recognizable even to those who know nothing about watches, no other dive watch even comes close to its influence and shared popularity. It was among a handful of the first commercially available dive watches, and it had a majority of all of its traits considered essential and iconic from the get-go. A lot of other dive watches are influenced by the sub in some way or another, and even the likes of Rolex's own Sea Dweller, an icon in its own right, is an evolution of it. Not all iconic dive watches need to be expensive or fall in that luxury category to be considered an icon. The next dive watch is a testament to that fact. The SKX was first introduced in 1996 and has one of the biggest cult followings. There are a number of Seiko dive watches you could call iconic, and the series known simply as the SKX is a descendant of Seiko celebrities like the 62 Moss and the 6105. It's become an icon, however, for rather different reasons than any other watch on the list. The SKX series, and particularly the version with the monochromatic black dial and bezel known as the SKX 007, became legendary as an extremely affordable dive watch that started many to get into watch collecting. Now discontinued, the collector buzz around it has ironically led the prices that make it far from the most affordable and capable automatic Seiko diver you could get. But collectors will not forget it, and its influence is seen in the design of modern collections from Seiko like the Seiko 5 Sports series. The 6th iconic dive watch is the Omega Seamaster 300 meters. Surprisingly, this collection was first introduced in 1993, but quickly gained notoriety. Omega has a number of notable dive watches, from the Seamaster 300, first introduced in 1957, to the weird, oversized Ploprof. But the Seamaster Diver 300 meters stands out above all for one major reason: a man named Bond, James Bond. The fictional spy wore many watches, but at the start of Pierce Brosnan's run as the character in 1995, a costume designer placed a funky blue Omega with the wavy dial on his wrist, and he's been a brand loyalist ever since. Bond has sometimes worn other Seamasters, like the Aquaterra and a couple of Planet Oceans, but the Seamaster Diver 300 meters is the Bond watch. The very 90s design has since been modernized a bit with the ceramic bezel, laser-cut dial, and flatter bracelet, but it remains very recognizable due to its many quirks, like the helium escape crown, and is one of the more unique designs among mainstream dive watches. Next up is the Panerai Luminor, first introduced in 1993. Often worn on a leather strap and lacking a rotating bezel, the Panerai Luminor might look out of place among traditional dive watches, but it does belong on the list of iconic dive watches because of its origins. Panerai developed the Radiomare as a dive watch for the Italian Navy in the 1930s, before rotating bezels were even a thing. The main focus were features like water resistance and legibility. Panerai also has the claim of developing the first loomed dive watch, using a material called Luminor. With its distinctive crown protector introduced in 1956, the collection now known as Luminor has a very unique and iconic look. These watches were long only available to the military and only first introduced to the public in 1993, with the boost from Sylvester Stallone helping to catapult them to icon status. Don't worry though, if you do decide you want a rotating bezel on your Panerai, the brand's slightly more traditional submersible collection will fit the bill. Last but definitely not least is the Tudor Black Bay, which is the youngest icon on the list, being first released in 2012. The Tudor Black Bay has quickly gained attention and love from watch enthusiasts and is the most representative symbol of Tudor's resurgence as a major player in the luxury watch industry. The Black Bay has a ton of vintage charm and distinctive characteristics like its snowflake hour hands, which is a nod to Tudor's original divers from 1969. As much as it owes its popularity in part to the brand's association with its sister company Rolex, the Black Bay with all its variants, like the ever-popular Blancpain 58, chronograph, and GMT variants, it easily stands on its own.